First and foremost, thank you for listening to my podcast, A Minute or So with Sharon. I chat about all things cyber and IT related. In the next few episodes, I'm looking at the deaths of well-known hackers, sort of like a true crime series, just with a twist. If you'd like to support me, you can do so by sharing my podcast, subscribing, or leaving a review. You could even support me on Patreon, and I'll put the link in the show notes. With Patreon supporters, they will receive exclusive content, and it costs only $3 a month. This contribution will help us with our costs. In the last podcast, we spoke of the suicide of James Dolan, and this episode, we cover the suicide of Aaron Swartz. The sources for this episode are various international media articles.
Sense of loss tonight in Highland Park, Aaron Swartz' hometown, as loved ones say goodbye to one of the internet's brightest lights.
Open access and computer activists are mourning his loss.
An astonishing intellect. We talked to people who knew that he was killed by the government, and MIT betrayed all of its basic principles.
They wanted to make an example out of him. Okay.
So who is Aaron Swartz? Aaron Swartz was a computer programmer, entrepreneur, and an activist who co-founded the social news site Reddit while still in his tweens. Swartz, 26, hanged himself with a belt in the Crown Heights apartment he shared with his girlfriend in January 2013. This is according to the New York Police Department. His death occurred a month before his scheduled federal court trial on wire fraud and hacking charges. Swartz faced 35 years in prison and a fine of more than $1 million for allegedly downloading millions of files from MIT's online academic archive JSTOR in 2011. According to prosecutors, Swartz intended to distribute the articles for free online. Swartz's death sparked widespread outrage in the cyber universe, where he was known as an outspoken activist hero, advocating for the protection of the First Amendment and successfully leading the charge in 2011 against the Stop Online Piracy Act, a federal bill that he believed would severely restrict freedom of speech on the internet. A month after his death, activists with militant group Anonymous hacked the State Department's website, publishing the personal data, addresses, phone numbers, and personal emails of consular officials and staff worldwide on a site called Zerabin. Our motivations for this attack are very simple, Anonymous stated after the attack. You have imprisoned or censored our people. We will not tolerate such behavior. You will be able to hear the lions roar. And when it's time to eat, you'll be our dinner. This is for you, Aaron Swartz. At his son's funeral in Highland Park, Swartz's bereaved father blamed the federal government for what he called an overzealous pursuit of his son. Aaron didn't commit suicide, Robert Swartz stated. The government assassinated him. The government pushed someone who made the world a better place to death. Even if his closest friends and family may have felt the same way, there were no such blunt pronouncements at James Dolan's funeral in New York earlier this month. Dolan, like Swartz, was a digital activist who worked to help nonprofits and journalists expose government corruption without jeopardizing their lives. But unlike Swartz, Dolan went out of his way to remain unnoticed. The computer security expert and Iraqi war veteran had virtually no online presence in an age dominated by social media. However, shortly after his death was announced in a blog post earlier that month, the internet was flooded with questions, some of which hinted at a conspiracy theory. WikiLeaks noted in a tweet, second developer of WikiLeaks inspired submission system, SecureDrop, security expert James Dolan, aged 36, has tragically died. He is said to have killed himself. The first, Aaron Swartz, is said to have committed suicide at the age of 26 after being persecuted by US prosecutors. On January the 14th, just days after Dolan's suicide was publicly announced, one Twitter user remarked, Both James Dolan and Aaron Swartz, who were working on the whistleblowing tool, committed suicide? Yeah, right. We're supposed to believe that. I don't believe so. Members of the hacktivist group Anonymous, which offered its own defiant tribute yesterday, also attended the funeral service of Aaron Swartz. The group hacked into the two MIT websites to post an in memoriam. Aaron had been studying ethics at the time he infiltrated his computer systems. Aaron's situation highlights the injustice of US computer crime laws, particularly their punishment regimes, Anonymous wrote. Aaron intended to make the MIT documents available on the internet as a statement in support of free speech. He was facing decades in prison and millions of dollars in fines. When I researched further, in United States of America versus Aaron Swartz, it states Aaron Swartz, an American computer programmer, writer, political organizer, and internet activist, was prosecuted for multiple violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986 after downloading academic journal articles through the MIT computer network from a source, JSTOR, for which he had an account as a Harvard research fellow. Facing trial and the possibility of imprisonment, Swartz committed suicide and the case was dismissed. Drawing from information published on Wikipedia and using investigative tools such as Accurate, FBI employees began quietly building a profile of the often described technology Wunderkind, noting, for example, his involvement in the creation of the formatting markdown language, RSS 1.0, jotting down the various code frameworks that Swartz had helped to create and organizations that he had helped to found. Eventually, with all the open source avenues exhausted, an FBI employee sat down at a computer terminal that to most people would appear plucked straight from the 1980s. The employee ran a search using the Bureau's automated case support system, a portal to the mother lode of FBI investigative files. When the FBI worker typed in Schwartz's internet domain, aaronsw.com, he got a hit. A single file popped up bearing the case number 315T-HQ-C1475879. The prefix 315 is a numerical classifier that was assigned to the file when it was created nearly 2 years before. It told the FBI employee that Schwartz's domain was linked, though not precisely how, to an international terrorism case, and then they cracked it open. The case had been something of a mystery since its existence was first unearthed by journalists and researchers who engaged the FBI in lengthy court battles over records related to Swartz, who was being targeted by overzealous prosecutors in January, and then he died in 2013 by suicide. So Aaron's domain, aaronsw.com, is still active. And it has 4 areas, which you can have a look at: the weblog, Twitter, links, quotes. There's nothing else that speaks about the case with the FBI. When you look at international, some of these media sources like the newspapers and that, there's a lot of conflict around what Aaron was doing. Was it right? Was it wrong? And it depends on which side of the fence you sit. What he was doing was classed as piracy, and the files, the academic files, didn't belong to him. They belonged to MIT. But Aaron was a fellow at the Harvard's Ethics Center Lab on institutional corruption. He served on the board of the Change Congress, a good government nonprofit. He's definitely gone before his time. He had an excellent mind. Reddit, as we know today, is one of the largest community chats, and it's still going strong. He was a frequent television commentator, and he wrote a number of numerous articles. But did he commit suicide? And that's the big question. Him and James Dolan, both involved in a similar project, contributed to a lot of the same things, both died by suicide. That is the question.